here making his weekly appearance, as he will be right up until NFL Draft 2021. Senior producer of NFL Films, Greg Cosell, joining us. And we are locked and loaded to talk linebackers today. And Greg is ready, as always, as he has been grinding the tape. Have you had to change eyeglass prescriptions yet, Greg? Because with the amount of film that you watch, I'm surprised your eyes have not fallen out of your skull.
Funny you mentioned that, Chris. I went to the eye doctor, I don't know, a month or so ago, and apparently my prescription changed ever so slightly. He said not enough where I really needed new glasses unless I really wanted to. But no, I haven't had to in a while.
Well, then you're very fortunate. Because,
I was the poster child. When I hit 40, all of a sudden everything changed, and my arms were no longer long enough to read. So that's when I knew I needed glasses. You know?
You're not the only one in that boat.
I know.
I take my glasses off and put them. I have I use readers on the air and everything. And
I've got about 7 pairs of readers, Greg. They're all over the place.
I take my glasses off and put them back on at least 50 times every show.
Oh, we're going to have an over-under on that in the not-too-distant
future. I do it all day long. I mean, it's But, because I don't need them for distance. I don't need them to drive. But I can't see anything without them as far as reading or doing this kind of work.
All right, so before we get into the linebackers, I'm gonna put the disclaimer out there. We've already had the discussion off the air with Greg about Tasker 3.0, so I'm not going to bore you with the hockey football convergence of scheduling, although it's a great idea, is it not, Greg?
Of course, in your example, that wouldn't work because every weekend is a Super Bowl weekend on Lower Broadway in Nashville.
Well, not like I've seen it. But anyway, yeah. But I get it. But it is a great idea. All right, anyway. Okay, so anyway, we're going to talk about linebackers this week, right? So you grind through this. How do you put a hierarchy on how you plow through these position groups? Do you pick all the quarterbacks?
You mean in terms of quote unquote value, that new term for all these positions?
Nah, yeah, kind of. But do you just say, okay, I'm going to go look at all the linebackers now, or I'm going to go look at this team, and I say I'm going to look at all the guys on this team, and then I do that? Or what? How do you do that?
No, it's very random with me. I can't watch one position. I can't watch 10 players at one position all in a row because it starts to look the same, because at the end of the day, there's very few, as you guys know, transcendent players or guys that are terrible where you just go, oh, that guy's great and it's obvious, or this guy he's not going to, he'll be a late round pick at best. Most players at positions are in that sort of mass of what I guess would be called second round to sixth round picks. And so many of those guys end up being in the eye of the beholder, team, scheme, coaching. And if I watch one position 10, 11 guys in a row, it just starts to look the same. And there are positions that are tough to watch. You can watch safeties, and you could go a whole game where they don't do much. You could watch a corner, and if he's not really attacked, you're trying to just watch his movement. So, no, I don't do it that way. I'm very random. I jump around.
So with that in mind, we've got a guy that some people consider an edge player. Some people think he's a linebacker. Joseph Osai is a guy we were talking about on the show here yesterday. And I don't know. I guess it depends on your scheme in terms of what you see him as. The thing that stands out about him is long-limbed play. He's got 34-inch arms, Greg, for a linebacker-type body, which is unusual. But he also, with all his playing time, doesn't have a tremendous amount of production numbers. So where do you come down on this guy?
Well, as you probably know, he moved from an off-the-ball stacked linebacker in 2019 to an on-the-ball edge player in 2020. And, of course, when you're in that role, you're a pass rusher. He's got very heavy hands. He's got a really strong body. And this guy plays with unbelievable competitiveness and effort. I mean, that's what stands out more than anything. But I would say that as far as being a pass rusher, I think he has work to do. He flashes on singular plays, but I think that he gets handled. He's not a sudden explosive guy. He's not a bender. He's not flexible. Overall, you can always find individual plays. I think he uses his arms well and his body strength well to try to play off contact. But I think he has work to do to really become a meaningful pass rusher at the NFL level.
What kind of, what's the upside to him? Is he a transcendent athlete? Is he long enough?
No.
I know he's tall enough. So what you're telling me now is you've got a guy you're looking at who can play football, obviously, but if he's going to be truly a great player or even a valuable number one pick, it's going to have to come from him.
Yeah, and again, I'm not good at making lists of players or doing mocks, but I would not look at Joseph Osai just in evaluating his game on tape, which is what I do. And I did not come away saying this guy is a number one or a first round pick in a draft. I think you'll be really excited by his high level of intensity. I'm sure that a D-line coach would say, hey, I want this guy in my room because this guy plays the game the right way. But I think you really have to work with him on how to become a better pass rusher. Now, that doesn't mean, Steve, that in 3 years he may not be a very good player. He's just not there right now. He's not and no one comes in as a finished product, obviously, but I think there's much work to be done.
One of the other guys on our list at linebacker is the linebacker from Kentucky, and I think I'm saying his name, Jamin Davis?
Jamin, yeah.
Jamin Davis, 6'4", 234 pounds. What can you tell us about this guy from Kentucky?
This guy, I've got a man crush on this guy. I didn't know anything about him until I put the tape on maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago. So he was totally virgin territory to me. And I loved his tape, loved it. I think this guy absolutely fits the NFL game. 6'3.5", 234, runs well, explosive athlete. He has size, length, play speed, coverage ability, range. He's willing to be physical in the run game. I think this guy, to me, and now that I've watched a lot of linebackers, and when I watched him, I'd probably only seen 4 or 5, but now I've probably seen 15 or 18. I think this guy is a really high-level prospect, particularly in today's NFL, because you have to think of it this way. What's the NFL game? It's sub. Look at the Bills. 90% of their snaps last year are nickel. They're going to play with 2 linebackers. So they're not the only team. I mean, obviously, they're high at 90%, but in order to be a high draft pick as a linebacker and have true value, to use that word that a lot of people throw around now, you have got to be able to play in sub. You've got to be able to play in space. You've got to be able to close down space. You've got to be able to run. You've got to be able to cover both in zone and in man. He can do all of these things. I think this kid's a high level prospect.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 4.47 speed, which even at 234 pounds is pretty ridiculous. What about the concerns of his body of work? A 1-year starter. Sometimes that gives scouting departments pause, and because, the body of work is not lengthy enough. They're quote unquote unproven. So where do you come down on that?
The way I come down on that is if you believe this guy is going to be a really high level player, I think that's worth it then. And the flip side of that is you hear scouts say this all the time. They talk about level of competition. He played in the SEC. So he played in the highest level of college competition. Yes, he obviously played 3 seasons before becoming a starter this past year. So I'm not sure. I'm being honest with you because I don't know exactly what that means. I'm sure different organizations address that differently. Sitting in my office here, just not getting a chance to talk to guys and all that. I mean, players I'm talking about. I'm just looking at the tape and seeing the traits. And I believe this guy has high-level traits. And if there's no red flags as far as personality, character, other issues, then I think this guy's a really strong prospect.
Yeah, he comes from a military family, so that certainly works in his favor in terms of discipline and the things like that you normally see from those kinds of backgrounds. You have a man crush on him. The guy I have a man crush on is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah from Notre Dame. Now, I don't think the Bills are going to get a whiff of him because he's going to be way off the board before pick 30. But, I mean, this guy looks like a modern-day linebacker too, does he not?
He's a fascinating player because he came in at his pro day at 221, which tells me he wants to be a linebacker. Because I had spoken to some people that said that he played this year, he was down to around 210. So at 210, he was not going to be a linebacker. But he obviously got up to 221 through all his workouts and wants to be a linebacker. He is an explosive guy. I mean, that's what immediately stands out. He's long, he's rangy, he's sudden, he's explosive. This guy has elite movement traits. And there are plays you're just blown away because this guy looks like he's shot out of a cannon. So I think he'll be a linebacker. Ultimately, and you guys know this, when you hear people say things like, well, he can play 5 positions, that doesn't happen in the NFL, and it certainly doesn't happen as a rookie. So maybe down the road, he can be kind of like that. You know who he kind of reminded me of? And he's probably more purely explosive, not quite as big, but more purely explosive. When I finished watching his tape, the player who jumped into my head was Derwin James. I think he's kind of, and I'm talking about the way he can be deployed. He's kind of that kind of player to me.
Yeah, Steve and I have been talking about this. The Bills, with as much as they play in nickel, they've been trying to find a hybrid type guy to put on the field when the other team goes 12, but maybe has an super athletic tight end. And, you know, Taron Johnson is undersized in that situation, and they have to take him off the field. They've used Dean Marlowe in recent years. They've used Saran Neal, you know, guys who are more of a safety type player. Koromoa would be a perfect fit for that hybrid linebacker cover type guy, would he not?
Absolutely, because when you watch the tape, you see, and this is why I love watching games, because you have to see what he does on every play. You saw that there were numerous snaps in which he lined up over slot wide receivers and tight ends. And that's a great point. And you know, a lot of teams now play a lot of big nickel because there's a lot of teams on offense that play with 2 tight ends. And one of those tight ends is essentially a glorified wide receiver. And there's only going to be more of those guys coming into the NFL.
Yeah. He's the perfect big nickel. Right. I mean, maybe the best I've seen in the last 5 years.
The question mark becomes, is for everything the defense does to match up, the offense tries to take advantage of. If he's having trouble staying at 225 and goes down to 210, they start to run the football right at him and see if he can hold up in that. And that becomes the issue, right?
It's funny you say that because when I watched the tape, I in my mind, I thought he was a safety. Right. In terms of the way in which he was deployed and how he played. He's not a stacked backer. That's what he's not. Right. Now, that doesn't mean he can't, quote unquote, be a linebacker. He's just not someone you're going to line up, let's say, right behind your 3 technique. I mean, he's not that player.
He's the kind of player that he's going to have to fit in your scheme. He's got a skill set, but it's kind of a unique skill set to go with the body that he brings and the physicality he brings. But he's got a lot of versatility, right?
Oh, and he's explosive as all get up. I mean, this guy, he makes plays where he can go from 0 to 60 in a heartbeat.
All right. Another guy we've been talking about. We had a conversation about this guy yesterday, Zavin Collins. He's completely different. He's 6'4", 260, and playing linebacker, and he's also, made some plays during his career at Tulsa.
Yeah, this guy's a little freakish. Amazingly enough, Steve, the one thing he's not at that size is he's not a purely physical player. He actually plays much more like an athlete than he does a pure physical player. I think that there's pass rush traits to be worked on. We saw him line up as basically a wide 9 pass rusher at Tulsa and rush the quarterback and show some ability to do that. Like I said, I think there's more there. This guy made some interceptions where he looked like he was a 220-pound safety. I mean, he had an interception return for a touchdown, I think, to end the game in overtime. That was 95 yards or so. And man, he looked like he was a 220-pound safety. But this guy's a multi-dimensional, multi-positional guy. In college, he played a lot of positions, and that usually tells you that he's got some smarts to him as well, because you wouldn't ask him to do that if he couldn't do it. So I think that he can be a sub-defense linebacker coming right into the league. Obviously, the Bills don't necessarily need that with Milano and Edmonds, but this guy is fascinating to me. He's bigger, but he kind of reminds me of the way the Patriots, and now he's back with the Patriots, the way they use Kyle Van Noy in kind of multiple positions, a multi-dimensional player, and doing a lot of different things. Collins, to me, is kind of that guy. He's just 260 pounds.
Yeah,
he's an athlete.
You look at him on paper and you say 6'3", 260, and it's hard not to think of Levon Kirkland. I don't know if you could look at a guy that carries 6'3", 260 any differently than Levon Kirkland.
Now he's 6'5". He's 6'4" and 7'8". So he's 6'5", 260.
Yeah, he looks.
It's
yeah.
insane. I mean, this
he's
guy,
big.
he comes right out of a science lab if you want to put 6'5",
No,
260 out on a football field.
And he looks like an athlete in the way he moves. He's a loose guy. I mean, he's not stiff, so he's going to be interesting. He's one of the guys I'm most fascinated to see who drafts him, and then that'll tell me something right away because I'll know, what the defensive coordinator.
Because Greg, 10 years ago,
I'm going to be fascinated.
Yeah, because 10 years ago, this is a guy that people would peg as an outside linebacker in a 3-4. He is more versatile than that. You don't have
Way more.
You don't have to pin him down in a 3-4 system. He could play in a 4-3 somewhere.
No, but you're 100% right, Chris. Years ago, he'd be a 3-4 outside backer or a 4-3 Sam. And that's what people would say, and that's what he would be, and that's it. See you later. Not in the way defenses play in the NFL now.
Right. And so we're talking about all these guys, and some of them couldn't look more different if they walk in the room. One guy's 6'5", 260. The other guy we were just talking about 6'1", 213 or 210
220,
at times.
220.
And they're both kind of lumped in. I think that's really the interesting part about the NFL at the current moment. Depending on who you've got and who you're facing, like if you're going to New England today and you're facing Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, it's very different than coming to Buffalo and facing Cole Beasley, John Brown, Gabe Davis, and Steph Diggs.
And you made a great point, and that's why you need players who can do both those things.
Right.
Now, it might not be the same player. It might depend on the week who gets more snaps. But it's also the reason, and I say this honestly, why I don't make lists at positions, because I don't know how to make a list that includes Zavin Collins and Owusu Koromoa. To me, they can't be on the same list. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Wanted to get your thoughts on Jabril Cox. He's kind of an interesting prospect here, and he's going to have a pro day on the 26th of April. I mean, you want to talk about cutting it down to the wire. This guy's doing it. But another guy who's, long athlete, but covers a lot of ground, doesn't look like a loping strider for being such a long player.
This guy's essentially a safety. I know he's 6'3", 232. He's not a physical player. He's an athletic finesse player. He's not going to take on blocks. He's not that guy. I know the size tells you that he's a linebacker, but he's essentially a safety. So he kind of fits today's NFL game because you're talking about a guy that they used to match up to tight ends, backs, wide receivers. This kid can run. I mean, he's got size, length, speed, range, coverage ability. He's a really smooth and fluid athlete. I don't think you'd be playing him. And again, it depends on the team and how much they play base. I don't think he'd be a base defense linebacker. Can he play in the box? Theoretically, he can, but that's not really what he does.
Might be another one of those hybrid type guys, though. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think there'll be legitimate questions that teams will have, Chris, as to whether he can play as a stacked linebacker. He's just not. Right. He's not really a physical guy, despite the fact that he's 6'3" and an eighth and 232.
Yeah, and and I'll say this: there's still, even in this generation, if you get tagged as a non-physical football player, that's a little bit like a face tattoo.
Yes,
you can't get around. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't get around.
No, I mean it's I mean, even in today's NFL, it's still a physical game, but the tape showed that he's not really that guy. I mean, he was not. He did not play through contact. He did not seem like that's what he really wanted. I'm not saying he didn't try. I don't want people to say that. I never talk about that with a guy because, I don't go there. But that wasn't the way in which he played the game.
One last guy I want to ask you about before we get out of here. It's a Buffalo kid, went to Boston College, Isaiah McDuffie. He'll be a mid-round, late-round draft pick, but he's a Buffalo kid, Boston College. I know you've probably watched a little tape on him. What do you think?
I watched him actually quite a bit. I actually watched him this morning in detail. He was a fascinating guy. He's so much fun to watch because this guy has relentless competitiveness and energy. But it gets into what we were talking about before. I think he's great in the box. I think he has a great feel in the box. Great play recognition, reaction quickness. This kid sees it and triggers now. I mean, he doesn't mess around. He goes, and he can get outside. He's got plus play speed and some range, but he's not a great athlete, and I don't believe he'll play in your sub. Certainly not early in his career. He will not play in your sub. So, again, what kind of value now do you put on that kind of player? And it becomes a team and scheme thing. Let's say you're a team that plays your base 40% of the time, which would be high in the NFL. You might look at this kid differently than a team that, plays in your base only 22% of the time. But that's what he is. He's a box stack backer, and he's really good at it, and he's so much fun to watch. And I guarantee coaches will want him in their room, the linebacker coach, but he just has limitations.
So really good chance that this guy is a guy that goes somewhere on day 3 and probably makes a roster as a special teamer as a rookie, right?
For sure. And you know what? He might play in the league for 10 years. If you have to put him out there because of the way in which he plays tells me that it's very important to him and that he works at it. And if you had to put him out there, you could put him out there. He just might not be exactly what you want athletically, but you could put this kid out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys, me being one of them, a lot of guys who made a living and have had a pretty good career, just exceeding everyday expectations. You know what I mean?
Steve, there's more guys like that than Jamin Davis. I mean, it's just that's the way it is.
That's right.
Well, Greg, we are out of time, but we thank you for breaking down some of these linebackers. We'll catch up with you next week as the draft is fast approaching for the next position group. We appreciate it as always.
All right, guys, appreciate it. Thanks so much.
And give long, hard consideration to Tasker 3.0.
There you go.
That is Greg Cosell from NFL Films.